There's a particular silence that begins to hum beneath a man's voice when he's hiding something. You don't hear it at first. It doesn't speak in words or gestures. It echoes in absence, of presence, of intimacy, of the sacred weight of attention. And it always begins with something that seems so ordinary, so painfully human. I've just been busy lately, a phrase as harmless as a breeze. But behind it, entire universes are collapsing. You see, when a man starts to emotionally drift, he doesn't sprint. He withdraws in ritual. Bit by bit, he detaches from the soul of the connection while keeping the outer form intact. His messages still arrive. His voice may still warm your ears, but something has shifted. The eye contact grows shorter, the hands colder. The energy between you no longer flows, it drips, reluctantly, like a dying candle. Carl Jung once wrote that the things we avoid consciously will rule us unconsciously. And here lies the dark truth about the busy excuse. It's not time that has escaped him. It's truth. Truth becomes unbearable in the presence of a woman whose eyes still see him, especially when he's no longer looking back with the same clarity. The modern man doesn't yet know how to hold both desire and devotion. So when temptation whispers, he doesn't confront it. He buries it. Behind meetings, projects, deadlines, behind a calendar that suddenly devours every ounce of his soul. But the feminine energy, when awakened, can sense what logic cannot. She doesn't need proof, text messages, or timelines. Her womb knows. Her chest tightens not because he's late, but because the thread that once connected her to his inner world is unraveling, slowly, secretly, and he's pretending not to notice. Here's where the deeper betrayal begins. In the performance of normalcy. He still laughs, still answers, still performs his role. But behind the veil, there's a hunger growing, one he hasn't told the truth about, not even to himself. He doesn't yet realize that the desire to cheat doesn't start with the desire for another woman's body. It starts with the rejection of his own shadow, the part of him that fears being seen as weak, the part that resents needing emotional accountability, the part that wants to feel powerful without being vulnerable. So he tells himself, and you, that he's overwhelmed, tired, under pressure. And maybe he is. But energy never lies. He's not too busy to answer a text. He's too fragmented to face the depth of connection you bring. And that fragmentation is not random. It is the first symptom of disloyal energy. Disloyal not just to you, but to the spiritual contract he once made when he chose intimacy over escape. Jung warned of the man who refuses to confront his inner dualities, the lover and the liar, the devoted and the deviant. When he suppresses one, it doesn't disappear. It shapeshifts into charm, into ambition, into polite avoidance, the kind of avoidance that makes you question your own intuition, that makes you second-guess the silence between his words, that makes you apologize for feeling what is already true. But the feminine soul was not designed to chase clarity. She births it through stillness, through sensation, through the unbearable recognition that love is not always honest, that men who once cherished you can also deceive you, not because you're unworthy, but because they have not yet learned how to carry your sacred fire without burning. When a man says he needs space, what he often means is that your presence has started to mirror something he can no longer run from. It isn't about needing air or time or solitude in the pure sense. It's a signal, subtle and charged, that your energy has pierced through the performance he's been maintaining. The sacred feminine, when it stands tall and awake, doesn't just comfort, it exposes. And exposure terrifies the part of him that has not yet been initiated into truth. He may not even be aware that he's pulling away. It may sound like he's asking for balance, for peace, for breathing room. But beneath the request is an instinct as old as the masculine psyche itself. Retreat in order to preserve control. Because to remain close to you would require a surrender he has not prepared for. a dismantling of the illusions he has built around his identity. And men who plan to betray, in small or large ways, often begin by building a narrative that justifies emotional distance. I just need to figure things out. There's too much going on right now. I'm not in the right headspace for anything serious. These words are not confessions. They are smoke. Not because they're always untrue, but because they're incomplete. The truth is rarely that clean. In most cases, space is not asked for as a sacred pause. It is weaponized as avoidance. He creates physical and emotional distance so that whatever line he's already approaching or crossing feels less like a betrayal and more like a natural progression. Carl Jung believed that the soul craves integration, not separation. But in men who are fragmented, who have not done the inner work to hold the depth of intimacy, there is a split. One part genuinely longs for you. The other part fears what he must become in your presence. Because you are not merely a woman to him, you are a reflection of his neglected feminine, his anima. And if he has not reconciled her within himself, your presence will feel like both medicine and threat. So he distances, not to heal, but to delay the reckoning. And that reckoning comes, not with a dramatic betrayal, but with a slow erosion of spiritual intimacy. The unanswered calls, the vague responses, the shift in tone that only your nervous system registers. You begin to sense that he is no longer in the connection, even if he's still physically present. He has built a shrine to space, and now worships the illusion of freedom while secretly craving the chaos of escape. What he doesn't realize, or perhaps does and cannot admit, is that the woman who has awakened to her full energy cannot be fooled by distance. She doesn't panic when a man pulls away. She listens, not to his words, but to the echo of his absence. She doesn't beg for clarity. She becomes it. This is not about control. It's about energetic sovereignty. The awakened woman knows that when a man asks for space without accountability, what he truly seeks is permission to be unfaithful, not just in body, but in soul. An emotional betrayal often begins long before physical intimacy is shared. It begins the moment he chooses silence over transparency, the moment he closes the spiritual channel between you, convinced that you won't notice. But you do. You feel it in the way his presence no longer nourishes you, but drains you, in the way your intuition grows louder as his explanations grow vaguer, in the way you begin to shrink, not because you've changed, but because his gaze no longer reflects the woman you are. He's no longer holding your light, he's hiding from it. And perhaps the deepest wound is not the disconnection itself, but the gaslighting that follows. The way he tells you you're imagining things, overreacting, being too emotional. This is how the feminine is disempowered, not with force, but with doubt. And it is this doubt that many women carry like invisible scars, long after the man has left, or stayed in body but not in truth. Jung once described the soul's journey as a spiral, returning again and again to the same truths, but each time from a deeper level of awareness. And in this spiral, the woman who has been told she is too much, too sensitive, too intense, comes to realize that she is not too much. She is just no longer willing to be less. So when he asks for space, let him go, not because you don't care, but because you do, about yourself. You don't need to chase him into his confusion. You don't need to explain your worth to a man who uses disconnection as a mask. You are not the space he's seeking. You are the mirror he's fleeing. And you cannot dim your reflection just to keep him comfortable. The sacred feminine does not beg. She becomes the altar he must return to, if he ever finds the courage to face his own soul. There's a peculiar kind of cruelty wrapped in softness when a man looks into your eyes and says, "You deserve better than me." On the surface, it sounds like humility, a kind of noble surrender, as if he's sparing you from his own brokenness. But when you strip away the gentle tone, what's left is not sacrifice, it's evasion, a retreat disguised as virtue. And more often than not, it's a sign that a betrayal has already begun. or is dangerously close. This phrase, cloaked in self-blame, is rarely about accountability. It's about control. It positions him as the tragic hero in his own story, flawed but self-aware, weak but honorable. In doing so, he claims the moral high ground even as he slowly steps away from emotional responsibility. And if you're not careful, it can leave you tangled in a narrative that isn't yours, trying to prove your love, your loyalty, your patience to a man who has already chosen detachment over devotion. Carl Jung warned us that the ego, when threatened, will do anything to maintain its image, even sabotage intimacy under the illusion of protection. And in this case, "you deserve better" is not an insight, it's a shield. One he uses to guard the parts of himself that cannot bear true closeness. Because true closeness means being seen, fully, nakedly, beyond performance. And that kind of seeing, the kind that only a conscious woman offers, threatens every mask he's ever worn. So he speaks in riddles of unworthiness. He paints himself as too broken to love, too damaged to be held. And at first, your instinct might be to reach for him, to reassure, to cradle the fractured boy behind the man. But this is the trap. When a man declares himself as unworthy and you stay, he begins to see you through the very lens he's condemned himself with. He may not say it, but deep inside, he starts to question why a woman of such value would remain with someone so flawed. And in that twisted mirror, resentment grows, not toward you, but toward his own reflection in your loyalty. This is not conscious cruelty, it's unconscious defense. He would rather hurt you now, softly, politely, than confront the real terror inside him, the fear that he cannot meet you at your depth, that he cannot rise to the frequency your soul is vibrating at. And so he steps down from the altar of your connection before you ever have the chance to invite him fully in. But here's what no one tells you about this kind of man. He may already be entertaining another woman, not because she's better, not even because he loves her, but because she does not yet require from him the kind of radical presence you do. She offers him escape, not reflection, ego inflation, not soul integration. And to a man in avoidance, that feels like relief. The betrayal here is not just in the body, it's in the narrative he spins to excuse his exit. "You deserve better" becomes the spell he casts to rewrite history, to make it seem as if stepping away was an act of love, when in truth it was an act of fear. A fear so deep it drives him to sabotage the very connection that could have healed him. But healing demands surrender, and surrender is a death to the ego, the part of him he has spent his whole life protecting. And yet, women, especially those rooted in their sacred feminine energy, often internalize this rejection as personal failure. You begin to wonder if you were too much, too intense, too demanding. But the truth is far more sacred. You were not too much. You were the mirror he wasn't ready to look into. And instead of rising, he shrank. Instead of expanding, he ran. Not because you weren't enough, but because you were the first woman who saw through him. Jung taught that the anima, the feminine within the male psyche, demands to be awakened if a man wishes to reach wholeness. But many men resist this awakening because it requires dismantling their armor. And a woman who is conscious, intuitive, emotionally alive, she doesn't just inspire love, she awakens the very shadow he spent years trying to silence. And when he says, "You deserve better," what he really means is, "I'm not willing to become the man your energy is summoning. So don't let yourself fall into the martyrdom illusion. Don't shrink to fit the guilt he refuses to carry. Let him leave. Let his unworthiness become his own terrain to navigate. You were not sent to convince a man of his value. You were sent to embody yours. And if that embodiment threatens him, so be it. Because there comes a moment in every woman's life where she must choose to keep healing men who refuse to rise, or to rise herself, and become the kind of woman who no longer attracts those hiding from their own light. He says, "You deserve better." You say, "I agree." And then you walk, not away from love, but toward the deeper truth, that your energy is not here to be pitied, softened, or dimmed. It is here to awaken, and only the man willing to meet you in that awakening will ever be worthy of your storm. There's a certain pause that occurs in a woman's body when she hears the words, "She's just a friend." It doesn't land like reassurance. It lands like a door quietly locking behind you. Something inside you tightens, but you don't yet know why. You want to believe him. You almost do. The tone is casual, the explanation smooth, but there's a flicker in his eye. Not guilt exactly, but a flicker of calculation. And it's in that flicker where the truth hides. Just a friend is one of the most culturally accepted disguises a man wears when he begins emotional infidelity. Because he knows that the friendship label buys him space. It offers plausible deniability. It allows him to nourish a connection outside your bond without appearing disloyal. And most dangerously, it manipulates your natural desire to be understanding, to not seem jealous, to prove you are secure. But security does not mean self-betrayal. And spiritual women, especially those rooted in deep intuition, often sense betrayal before it has a name. Carl Jung wrote that every person carries within them the image of the opposite gender, the anima in men, the animus in women. And when this image is repressed, it begins to surface through projection. This is why men who have not integrated their feminine side often become obsessed with certain women. Not because those women are special, but because they are mirrors. Mirrors for the feminine energy he cannot access within himself. And when a man cannot face his anima inwardly, he seeks her outwardly. That's the moment she becomes just a friend. But this friend, she's different. She listens to him without expectation. She doesn't require the emotional rigor that your relationship demands. She becomes a safe container for the parts of him that he doesn't show you anymore. And because she isn't you, she isn't dangerous to his ego. She's soothing because she doesn't hold a mirror to his contradictions. She doesn't demand transformation. She allows the fantasy of emotional safety without consequence. And that's where the betrayal begins. Not in the bedroom, in the mind. It's the text messages that come late at night, disguised as harmless. The coffee dates he doesn't mention until afterward. The sudden change in how he dresses when he knows she'll be there. You start to notice the details. His defensiveness when you ask about her, the way he says her name a little too often, the way he claims your concern is insecurity rather than insight. This isn't coincidence. This is projection in motion. He's placing parts of himself into her because he can no longer hold those parts in your presence without facing shame, failure, or fear. And yet he insists, she's just a friend. But a man who honors you never has to use language to hide what's sacred. Friendship should never feel like a triangle. It should never carry the scent of secrecy. You know the difference between connection and chemistry, between warmth and threat. And he knows you know. That's why he doubles down. That's why he tries to make you question your own feminine intelligence. Because if you believe him, he can keep living in both worlds. The one with you, grounded in commitment, and the one with her, untouched by responsibility. But the soul keeps score, even when the mind plays dumb. His nervous system knows he's crossed a line, even if his words deny it. And yours does too. Your body tightens when you hear her name. Your breath shortens when his phone lights up. You begin to feel like you're losing him, not to love, but to illusion. To a version of himself he only gets to be when no one's asking for depth. This isn't about the other woman. This is about the man who cannot carry his own inner world. And so, he displaces it onto someone softer, safer. Someone who doesn't know the shadow side he hides from you. He offers her charm without accountability, and it thrills him, not because it's love, but because it's escape. Jung believed that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life, and we will call it fate. And so it is with men who emotionally stray. They believe they are choosing freely, when in truth, They are being dragged by the parts of themselves they refuse to examine. The more they deny the inner feminine, the more chaos they create with women in the outer world. And no relationship, no matter how sacred, can survive that level of avoidance. But this moment, painful as it is not a tragedy. It is a threshold. It is the moment when the awakened woman remembers that her intuition is not paranoia, that her ability to sense misalignment is not a flaw, that her body does not lie even when a man does. And it's here, in the heartbreak, that she reclaims something ancient, her right to trust herself above all. You do not have to wait for him to admit what your spirit already knows. You do not have to compete with a woman who has become his emotional outlet. You are not here to be the container for a man's projections. You are here to be met, wholly and openly. And any man who feeds his soul elsewhere while calling it friendship is already gone. You are simply catching up to the truth. Let him cloak it in innocence. Let him call it nothing. You have walked through too many fires to question your flame. And if he chooses shadows over substance, you will not dim your radiance to follow him there. There's a moment after betrayal where silence becomes deafening, not because there are no answers, but because the ones offered insult the very intelligence of your soul. It just happened, he says, as if desire were a storm that overtook him without warning, as if bodies moved without consciousness, as if hearts slipped without consequence. But nothing just happens in the realm of intimacy. Every action is preceded by a choice, and every choice by an inner permission. This is the final gate, the one where illusion dies. The excuse of impulse is not born from truth, but from the last desperate attempt to deny responsibility. He says it like a child caught in a lie, helpless, wide-eyed, pleading to not be punished for a hunger he claims he couldn't control. But control was never the issue. Awareness was, and he surrendered it, piece by piece, long before the act itself. Carl Jung spoke often of the shadow, the disowned self, the hidden drives that, when left unexplored, take over our lives in secret. A man who cheats does not simply fall. He follows an unspoken path of silent permissions. First, he tells himself he's unfulfilled. Then, that he's misunderstood. Then, that his needs are unmet and his desire, justified. And somewhere along that trail, he forgets the vow he made, not just to you, but to the part of himself that once knew what integrity felt like. By the time the betrayal becomes physical, the emotional betrayal is already complete. The soul has already turned away. The intimacy has already been hollowed out. But it just happened makes it sound accidental, like a momentary slip of the human spirit. And that's the mythology patriarchy has allowed men to hide behind, that their urges are beyond them, that biology is stronger than empathy, that lust is a force too ancient to resist. But the sacred feminine knows better. She knows that real power is in restraint, that to feel a desire and not act on it is not denial, it's devotion. She understands that integrity isn't about perfection, but about being honest enough to pause before damage becomes destiny. And the man who says, "It just happened," is revealing not that he's weak, but that he's disconnected from the most essential part of himself, his capacity to choose love over self-indulgence. There's a deeper insult hidden inside this phrase, one that wounds beyond the act itself. Because what he's really saying is, I didn't think of you, not in the moment, not in the days leading up to it, not in the aftermath. And perhaps that's what hurts the most. The realization that someone could forget your humanity so easily in the face of their own gratification. But that forgetting is not random. It's a spiritual amnesia, a descent into unconsciousness fueled by avoidance, ego, and unprocessed pain. A man does not need to be evil to betray. He only needs to be unaware. And in a culture that never taught men how to feel, how to hold themselves accountable, how to sit in discomfort without numbing it with distraction, betrayal becomes a familiar escape route. Still, as women, We are taught to analyze ourselves first, to ask if we loved enough, gave enough, were sexy or calm or wise enough. But the truth is rarely about what you lacked. It's about what he refused to face in himself. And no amount of your giving could have protected him from the choices he was already making in silence. You see, every betrayal begins with a man convincing himself he's the victim of circumstance, of pressure, of emotional neglect. And once he tells himself that story, anything becomes justifiable, even the act he later calls a mistake. But mistakes are unconscious. Betrayal is premeditated in the heart, even if not in action. So where does that leave you? Not in shame, not in inadequacy, but in power. The kind of power that arises not from revenge, but from recognition. The recognition that you were never here to save a man from his own darkness, that your love is not a remedy for someone's refusal to heal, that your value was never dependent on his loyalty, because loyalty is not a favor. It's a reflection of one's own self-respect. Carl Jung believed that every wound, when faced fully, carries within it the key to transformation. And this betrayal, however personal it may feel, is not the end of your story. It is the forbidden gate, the place where the old version of you dies, and a deeper one begins to emerge. The version that no longer tolerates half-truths, that no longer softens her intuition to preserve a false peace. The version that doesn't need explanations to validate what she already feels. Because your body always knew. Your breath changed. Your dreams shifted. Your laughter felt different. Women carry, knowing in their bones, a knowing that has survived generations of silence, of being told they're imagining things, of being made to shrink beside men who were never brave enough to stand beside them fully. And now you remember. You remember that your sensuality is not chaos, it is compass. That your emotions are not weakness, they are wisdom. That your need for truth is not intensity, it is sacred design. You were not created to be lied to, explained away, or used as a mirror for someone's unexamined shame. You were born to rise, through truth, through darkness, through fire, so let him say it. Let him tell you it meant nothing. Let him call it a moment, a mistake, a thing that just happened. You no longer need his story to reclaim your own. You have walked through the shadows of his forgetting, and now you stand on the other side, not as the betrayed, but as the awakened. And in this awakening, there is no longer a need to explain your worth. You are not here to be picked. You are here to be honored. And the man who cannot meet you in that place is not your punishment. He is your initiation. Thank you for walking through this truth with me. If your heart trembled, if your voice rose, if you saw yourself reflected in these hidden layers, then know this: you are not broken. You are becoming. And the woman you are returning to has always been waiting beneath the silence. Until next time, stay close to yourself. You are sacred, you are sovereign, and you are no longer asleep.